Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with me, Kim Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. Joining me today is Marketing and Leadership segment, our marketing and communications expert and co-host Craig Paisley. How are you doing, Craig?
Kevin, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, good to be chatting again today, considering that I've only got my voice back properly this weekend, after being ill last week with a really horrible throat and chest infection. But yeah, trundling along, lots of water at hand to keep the throat moist and head into it. How are you doing?
All good, all good, at least not in this situation you've been. And I was thinking, in all the 2 years that we've done this, that would probably be the first time that you've called and said, I'm too sick to be able to do the show.
In fact, Kevin, yes. It's over 3 years in terms of when we started to where we are
Yes.
today. 100%. That is the first one. And yeah, to be sitting on 3 sets of antibiotics just goes to show how a man down I was. But yeah, I'm alive, I'm here, and that's cool.
Yeah. Craig, so as we start today's show, please give us a quick overview of our last week's conversation.
Sure, Kev. So for last week's conversation, we looked at some key influences and strategic directions that are shaping brand strategy heading into 2026. I pulled 8 points or sort of influences, as we'll call them, from various sources online, and this is the summary reminder from that conversation. So influence 1 is purpose-led and values-driven branding. Here, consumers are increasingly expecting brands to stand for something beyond just product or service. Principles like ethical practices, social impact, environmental stewardship being at the front of the conversation. Influence 2 is community first and stakeholder inclusive brands. This is about, rather than seeing audience as passive recipients, brands are actually building communities and tribes of users, advocates, and creators. Influence 3 is sustainability is about regeneration and transparency. Again, interesting point we made here is that sustainability piece really coming to the fore again, because it did sort of drop down the rankings a little while ago. This is about regeneration and how brands are restoring ecosystems, how they're engaging in a lot more circularity models and going beyond minimal impact. Influence 4 is adaptive human-centered identity and experience, and I really like this. Visual identity trends for 2026 sort of signal a shift away from these slick tech, minimalistic sort of worlds towards warmth, imperfection, human touch, embracing kind of brand positioning. Influence 5 is immersive and phygital brand experiences. This is about brands expanding into a lot more immersive experiences, blending the physical and digital, giving us that phygital, using AR, VR, interactive storytelling and gamification as your topic we've covered before. Influence 6 is brand architecture and clarity and complexity. I really like this. More companies are prioritizing brand architecture, which is about how brands relate to each other to avoid the dilution and unlock more value in the offering. And 7 is short form interactive content and creative, at least creator economy partnerships, with attention spans, diminishing on a daily basis. Brands are investing in short form, snackable video, for instance, reels and shorts, and a lot more interactive content and gamification. And Kevin, the last reminder is influence 8 here, which is clarity, simplicity, and meaningful engagement. Some commentary suggests trends back to less is more, focusing on fewer, higher quality brand interactions rather than volume. And I really subscribe to that principle.
Fantastic conversation, guys. So definitely go check it out wherever you find your latest podcast. But Craig, what are we going to be chatting about today?
Kevin, thanks. So at the end of our last show, you requested I provide a bit more of an in-depth explanation on the topic of employer branding, which is the area I'm working extensively at the moment. And while we have touched on aspects of the topic in various conversations, they've been threaded into some of the other topics. We're going to look at really single-mindedly picking up on this conversation today. So to start off with, I want to set some context, firstly, by looking at the key difference between probably 2 of the most important concepts and phrases in this area of organizational positioning, Kevin. And the concepts are, firstly, the employee value proposition, and secondly, employer branding. And again, referencing a whole host of LinkedIn articles, and there's really some good content on this topic in LinkedIn, because obviously LinkedIn is really one of the primary career platforms to engage around this topic. I came across the following. EVP, employee value proposition, is internal, and EB, employer branding, is external. EVP is internal because, Kevin, it's actually the side of the company that employees see, while external audiences may not necessarily know what value that company actually provides to its employees. Therefore, employer
Yeah.
branding comes into play because it's the outward expression of the employer value proposition, and it's effectively articulated to appeal to the right external audience or talent wanting to work within that organization. And another way of framing the difference between the two concepts is that EVP is research-driven, while employer branding is the creative expression of the employer value proposition and how that message is crafted and delivered externally. EVP is not a department. It's not an identified executive or physical thing, Kevin, because actually it's inherent to employees, and it can only be explored through research and real data gathered from employees through various surveys and internal engagements. EVP takes the key components, the realities and subtleties of that employer brand, and it streamlines those into key defined pillars. And most importantly, it then answers questions like, what's in it for me to join this organization? What's expected of me in my role within the organization? But most importantly, EVP defines what employees actually get out of working for that company, whereas the employer brand tells other people in the external market those very, very key propositions.
It's fascinating, Craig. But from what you've explained, the employee value proposition is the why, and the employer brand is the what and the how. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly summed up. Yes, because the EVP is the why. Why are you working in the organization? Why are we bringing you here? Why do we do what we do? EVP is therefore constructed around the why, the purpose, all of those salient points. Whereas the employer brand shows the world what we do and how we do it. Yeah, so in essence, to summarize that in a single line, Kevin, is probably the EVP defines the brand's identity through the perception of the employees working within the organization, whereas the employer brand is these series of steps that you take to market through the various channels identified to actually then draw in the top talent back into the organization.
Craig, this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because part of that conversation, that just for clarification, is so many brands still, big corporate brands that I even know of. I know of one currently. They don't really know why they do what they do. They know what they do. They know how they do it. But the messaging of this big, very big corporate brand is all over the show. And it's almost strange, because you're kind of going, in one sector, you hear like the brand voice in a certain context, and in a different context, you hear it completely differently. And then there's marketing that happens, and you're like, how does this fit into that? And so, is that what we're talking about? That
So, Kevin,
culmination of understanding.
That's a great point, because it actually consists of all of those components. And I'm working with an amazing client at the moment who realize that they too have a lot of statements in the marketplace. There's obviously a key positioning statement. There are slogans, there are campaign lines. There's an overarching communications framework, which often has its own positioning statement as well. Then there is campaign messaging. So it's just this plethora, and it's a matrix of really being able to look at an organization and starting at the top and say, this is your brand. What does your brand stand for? Why are you in business? What is the purpose of the brand? You can articulate that in a particular way, and that sets the framework up for how your messaging construct then builds out of that. Then you can get into your overarching communication framework, which would be a theme that has longevity to it, and you can build various campaign themes across seasonality, new product launches, etc. But you've got to be able to understand the construct of what that overarching message is and how it can cascade through every single layer of the organization. Then how do you take that and articulate that for an internal audience, for them really to get to understand the why of the business, all the value propositions that you're offering staff to keep them engaged in the business, to enable them to grow, et cetera, and then how do you take that and articulate that into a really good, strong external campaign using all of the social media channels, the career sites, et cetera.
So who then leads the employee branding, and how are the teams structured, Craig?
Yeah, good, Kevin, question. In my conversations with various business leaders on this point, it's I usually repurpose the question with them, and I say, actually, who invests in employer branding? Because it does require investment, not just from people, time and effort, but financial commitment as well. So investing in employer branding, Kevin, is a strategic decision, and it has to be supported by a mix of HR, recruitment, marketing, and executive leadership. And I always bring it back to sort of the rigidity of a equilateral triangle where you've got your CHRO, your CMO, and your CEO. So your three C-suite champions and contributors to the equation leading the proposition. And there's a couple of really awesome, simple points that I want to take you through here that can actually give you a little bit of an explanation on every single one of the stakeholders that have a role to play, Kevin. So the first one is obviously HR and talent acquisition leaders. They invest in employer branding because they want, firstly, to attract and retain top talent, to improve time to fill and cost per hire, and they want to build a much stronger pipeline for future talent coming into the business. Common roles here would be your chief human resource officer, your head of talent, or even recruitment directors. The second stakeholder group here is your employer brand specialists or employer brand teams, external like myself or some internal to the organization. These teams craft and manage employer brand strategy. They oversee the evolution of the EVP development and rollout, and they make sure that they align messaging across all the recruitment channels and drive it deeply into the organization through internal comms. Common roles here would be employer brand managers, people experience leads. Again, some of those sitting within the organization, some being external to the respective organizations. Then, most importantly, marketing and comms teams. They equally invest in employer brand because they ensure alignment with the corporate brand, most important. They support social, digital marketing and brand storytelling, and they leverage employee advocacy for brand awareness. This is something that has to be embedded in every single employer brand strategy. Common roles would be brand directors, marketing managers, internal comm leads, Kevin. But it's not just an internal comms program. It's often just pushed into HR and HR into internal comms. It has to be driven through the front end of marketing leadership.
Great, but as you're unpacking it like this, you can see that this is not just a good idea. This is a foundation to what and why and how a company functions to make sure there's alignment through every single process.
Correct. It's business strategy, Kevin. People are at the core of delivering productivity and adding revenue to the bottom line. If the employer brand strategy is not high on the agenda, it's just not going to function. And in fact, that's a perfect segue into the next point because, the fourth stakeholder group is your executive leadership and your C-suite. They have to be invested in employer branding because they firstly support company growth through talent acquisition. They understand the importance of reducing high turnover, and they have to protect the company's reputation, and they have to ensure that the culture aligns with the strategic goals of the organization. The common roles of participation of the stakeholder group would be your CEO, CFO, COO, and in essence, your broader group of board members, Kevin. The final group that needs to be invested in employer branding is that of your business unit leaders and hiring managers. So not hiring managers just from an HR point of view, business unit leaders because they cascade throughout the organization, and that's where the interface with employees happens. They play an important role because they improve candidate quality and team fit. They attract candidates with the relevant skills, and they ensure that cultural alignment is in place. And most importantly, is they remain focused on reducing time lost due to attrition and mishires throughout the organization.
So, Craig, talking of investment in EM, who funds these programs?
Yeah, Kevin, another good question because they're different areas of the business, and often it's just left into a bit of HR and a little bit of internal comms. But let's look at the construct around this. In employer branding programs for larger companies, often they have, which is really great, they have dedicated employer branding budgets that sits within HR and marketing or both. For mid-sized companies, they may fund the employer brand efforts through some of the shared budgets. Also, with the larger companies, they understand the need to share budgets across HR and marketing. In startups and scale-ups, Kevin, they often just invest when scaling up rapidly. They definitely struggle to compete for talent, and it's difficult for them to put the financial commitment in place because they're really investing in equipment and trying to get talent and systems and all of those things embedded. And then recruitment process outsourcing, this is an interesting proposition. They sometimes offer employer branding as part of their services stack. So an organization who really doesn't have the capacity of a team and the full stack budget would look to outsource. And that's where the likes of myself would come in, almost creating a fractional EB role for the organization. And then, Kevin, investment can be allocated to different stages of an EB program as well, because not all employer branding programs start at the same point. Organizations who have gone through some kind of cycle of embedding the employer value proposition, they start at a different point. But guys who are coming into this, for the first time, the investment has to start with employee value proposition research and developments around the pillars. Then there needs to be some kind of investment in building a really compelling career website and content to support the call to action to draw the talent in. Then obviously there's investments around a good social media strategy, and content creation is not necessarily a cheap exercise. Then when you're on your journey and well embedded in the process, there's recruitment marketing campaigns. That could be quite an expensive exercise if you're moving outside of your own channels into a lot more of the bought channels. There's the opportunity to align with reputation management platforms like Glassdoor or Indeed. Again, investment required there. Employee advocacy programs, your alumni groups and things like that, bit of investment required there. And then, you can throw some really good money behind the likes of employer brand ambassadors or internal champions within the organizations, motivating and rewarding for participation, Kevin. But just to close on this particular point around the actual investment component, it is important to acknowledge that employer branding does matter. And Kevin, it does pay off because it directly influences a company's ability to attract, engage, and retain top talent. And I just want to add another word there, the right top talent. And through this, you definitely can see an impact on performance, positive impact on culture, and inevitably long-term competitiveness and growth to the bottom line. And some of the facts to prove this, and I know you love facts, organizations with a strong employer brand, Kevin, they can experience up to 43% saving in cost per hire of the right talent.
Wow.
They can experience up to 28% reduction in employer turnover. That's what organizations need. They can experience up to 50% more qualified applicants or candidates that you can keep in your talent pipeline for future, up to a 30% reduction in overall recruitment costs, verified through a really good study conducted by Unilever, and up to 202% improved performance due to higher levels of engagement and higher productivity and output.
Craig, those numbers are ridiculous. 43% are saving on cost and hire, right? And up to 50% of more qualified applicants and 202% improved performance due to higher levels of engagement.
Yeah.
So like when you have the data like that, then, having someone like you on their team would literally pay for itself first off. And you would also literally solidify a brand in a way that they don't necessarily even anticipate, right? Because when you have stats like this to support what this actually does to a brand, that is pretty phenomenal.
But you've made, for me, one of the most important statements I try and get across when engaging in conversations on this topic is that cost, that saving of cost in talent, the reduction of cost and spend, one engagement covers my fee in this proposition entirely. And that's an ongoing cost saving.
Yeah, because it just, to me, it makes absolute sense where you're having the alignment, when you're having all of these factors that you've spoken to, and it starts embedding, through every department, in every marketing, in every sales conversation, in everything that the brand offers. It literally solidifies who the brand is.
And Kevin, to put a financial value behind it, if you're looking at two executives, coming in, the senior managers at $1 million and a half a month, a month, listen to me, $1.5 million a year. Okay, that's two employees at $3 million at a 15%. Even if you go 10% of the fee to place those individuals as a recruitment fee, there's a 300,000 rand cost there. One intervention paid for through the percentage of those two employees. Every single cent from an employee there onwards would be saved.
Yeah, it's brilliant, man. Yeah. So what are the most important considerations for an organization in developing a strong, authentic employer brand, Craig?
Yeah, Kevin, this is a good question, and there are a host of different propositions to answer this, but what I've done is I've pulled 10 key points that really sit at the heart of sustainable talent and culture strategy, and these in turn help develop a strong, authentic employer brand. And it's important to note that it's not just about this beautiful glossy messaging in the marketplace, but it's about truth, it's about consistency, and it's about the enablement of that real lived experience that you're promising staff. So let's take a look at these 10 important considerations. The first one here is clarity of purpose and alignment with business strategy. You mentioned earlier on, you could see the importance of this in the realm of business strategy. So why does it matter? Well, your employer brand must connect directly to your organization's mission, vision, and values, not just operate as a standalone HR campaign. And a point to consider here is, how does your purpose translate into this meaningful employer experience? And can employees see how their work actually contributes to the bigger picture, Kevin? The next and why does this matter? We ask, well, employees and candidates wanting to come in quickly spot inauthenticity, particularly the Gen Zs and millennials. They can pick it up, in a breath. The gap between your stated employer value proposition and the reality of what actually happens on the ground will damage the trust and erode trust in the organization. And a point to consider here is, ground your employer brand in truth, build it from the employee insights and not just leadership aspirations, because employees have to deliver against the leadership aspiration. And if there's a misalignment there, you're definitely never going to go in the right direction, Kevin.
But Craig, I just want to, on these first 2 points, clarity and purpose and alignment and authenticity, I think just listening to it, and I'm sure you come across this quite often, that, it challenges how we do business. It challenges who we are in business. So as much as this process sounds very critical and important, I think for some brands, it's really impossible to do. It's nearly, it's changing their character. It's changing their identification. It's how they do business. Like, it could actually challenge leaders in ways that they don't anticipate.
So the critical thing to that comment, and again, Kevin, is that what is the purpose of those business? If they haven't really clearly understood their why, then they're never going to be able to address these particular points. Never.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next consideration is the EVP development, and the employer value proposition is the foundation. It defines what you stand for as an employer, and it clearly articulates what employers can expect in return for their contribution in working in the organization. Points to consider here is that you must build your EVP around your key pillars, such as the likes of culture, career development, leadership, well-being, really critically important pillar in today's day and age, flexibility and impact. And then really delve into the data. Organizations have got piles and piles of data just used ineffectively. Combine these qualitative insights around employee stories and focus groups with the quantitative data stack around engagement surveys and exit data. Use those to articulate the effective EVP that employers need and are looking for. The fourth consideration here is internal engagement before external activation. Very important to understand. Your people are your most credible brand ambassadors, and if they don't believe internally, no external campaign is ever going to fix that, Kevin. Point to consider here is communicate, co-create with the teams, celebrate internally first, and then make sure managers can articulate and live the EVP themselves. There's often a big misalignment when you're cascading up into the management level. It is such an important point you make there, because the EVP, when you looked at the stats of 202% improvements in performance and engagement, when the pillars of the EVP are defined and effectively align with the purpose organization and the needs of the people, the engagement level is where you're seeing the improvement at a customer interface. So when your EB and EVP is working, your CX is definitely sitting in the top right-hand quadrant, and that's where you want the organization to be at its optimal performance with all of the employees. So when EVP pillars match the needs of the organization, match the needs of the talent are drawn into the business because the values are aligned, the purpose is clearly articulated, and there is alignment around purpose as well. Performance is improved, customer experience is definitely on the way up.
Yeah, that just makes sense, right?
Then the next consideration is consistent storytelling across all touch points. And the reason this matters is that candidates and employees experience your brand through multiple channels: job ads, social media, onboarding, even the leadership comms, your town halls, etc. Points to consider here is just ensure your tone, the visuals, and the messaging align everywhere, Kevin, from LinkedIn to exit interviews. There has to be consistency of tone, intent, and message. The next consideration here is leadership and culture as proof points. And this is my favorite. Why does this matter? Well, obviously, leadership shapes culture, and their behavior either reinforces or undermines the employer brand. And the point to consider here is, leaders need to demonstrate the walk, the talk proposition. They need to demonstrate the authenticity, because that really is the ultimate proof brand point for any organization, Kevin.
Yeah, and, it's especially when you get to this level, Craig. I think if the leaders and the culture of the organization doesn't like walk the talk, if there's no congruency in, we're putting this out as part of our value proposition, but yet our leaders show up, not doing it, or the ones who are not leading by example, then it's, it's almost like, why are we doing this? It
Exactly.
has to be a leadership culture, right?
Consideration 7, measure, adapt, and evolve. And this is the beauty about a program like this. It's this amorphous, evolving program. Employer branding isn't a campaign, Kevin. It's an evolving ecosystem that straddles the entire organization up and down every single level, front end customer facing to back end support services. It's about tracking key metrics, the key things around employee engagement. What is your candidate quality? What are those employee platforms, advocacy platforms like Glassdoor? What is the sentiment around that? What is your retention rate? What is your referral rate? And then use those insights to actually repackage that narrative and get the storytelling effective. Consideration 8 is inclusivity and belonging. Definitely matters, because a brand can't be authentic if it doesn't reflect and celebrate the diverse employee experiences. Points to consider here is ensure inclusion and equity are woven through the EVP and your day-to-day practices. It's not just a bolt-on activity once a quarter or something like that. Needs to be embedded in the DNA of the organization.
Yeah, and we know we've covered inclusivity and belonging so many times. We know the impact it has. We know
Yes.
the outcomes it has. We know how important it is. So, I mean, it just goes without saying. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Last two here. Consideration 9 is cross-functional collaboration. This consists around HR, marketing, and the comms team. You need to build a strong employer brand. This bridges the internal culture and external reputation. Things to consider here is creating a strong joint task force between HR, marketing, and corporate comms to ensure that unified storytelling is in place and that it aligns with the customer-facing brand as well, because you can't have a mismatch in that regard. And then the final consideration here is experience-driven, not just message-driven. This is a lovely one to end up on. Employer brands live in experiences, Kevin. It's through the onboarding experience, it's through the feedback experience, it's through the culture of the organization, it's through growth opportunities for staff, and it's through recognition. Key here is to audit and enhance the key employee moments that shape that perception and improve the overall experience.
Yeah, I love it, Craig. And I think a few weeks ago that we also spoke about the lived experience, and
Yes.
what your brand messaging is literally conveying and how it's connecting to people. So I think from this perspective, when you start with that external kind of approach, this kind of stuff needs to have done already. You
Correct.
have to have this solidly in place, because then that external experience to your customers and clients is going to be a lot easier to pull off.
Absolutely. And then in closing for today, Kevin, it's really important to understand and note that building the authentic employer brand is not just about attracting the right new talents to bolster the performance of your workforce, but really it's about ensuring that you retain and develop the best existing talent as well. It's then about broadcasting what your employer value proposition is. What is the compelling reason that actually defines why you are better than your competitors and why you stand out from other employees? And that will then show new talent why they must choose your organization and why existing talent will stay on the back of those compelling stories and value proposition as well.
Amazing. Craig, and just to for anyone who's listening about this, just to reinforce, this is what you've been doing for a number of large banks in South Africa, Namibia.
Yes.
You've been doing this for some insurance companies. This is what the level of what these brands are actually tackling this kind of conversation.
Correct. And It's interesting to see that the only organizations that have really lent in to this are the financial services guys. The war for talent in financial services and tech is at an extreme. But the financial services organizations seem to be the ones that have put some money at play into this running these programs. The other organizations that are really developed very strong employee value propositions and EV brands through the strength of their internal teams, the likes of AB InBev, SA Breweries, ShopRite Checkers, they wholly Vodacom, they are wholly focused on this being really one of those key strategic pillars in the organizations. They are big organizations doing it for a couple of years now, but there are financial services organizations leaning into the importance of this proposition. Has been really amazing to work with them. I'm just looking to see what the other parallel industries are that are understanding the value of the savings being made through the right talent coming to the organization, being able to fund an employer brand program and bringing in the right talent and keeping the existing right talents in the organization.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic, Greg. I think it's when you unpack it to this degree, it's almost like a no-brainer. Like, if you haven't done this, why haven't you done it yet? Because the structured way and the structured approach of what this actually offers for a brand, and breaking it down to this degree just makes so much sense. Because I think it's clarity. The word that comes up for me is clarity of the brand. Right.
I love that. And, Kevin, again, for organizations that haven't lent into programs of this nature, starting with the reputation diagnostic, it's a simple piece of research we do with the organization, qual and quant, internal and external, current and recent levers, getting to understand the brand perception, both from internal and external, having a look at that against the EVPs, your net promoter scores, doing a 6-week program, embed a clear understanding, do a mini workshop just to help them get over the line in the first stage of articulating and fixing the EVP pillars. And then you can build into a deeper, much more embedded program. But really the front end can help organizations very quickly get out the starting blocks and get to understand some of the key things in a short period of time that they can work on to gain some quick wins.
Absolutely. I love it. And our quote for today, Craig, Simon Sinek says, "Customers will never love the company until the employees love it first."
There it is. There it is right there, Kevin. Absolutely.
Right. And
Absolutely.
it makes sense because you kind of go, and there's the value proposition. When the company loves itself to that degree, the clients will definitely love it. Right. I love it. All right, guys. So please tune in every Wednesday and Thursday for more on the Lunchtime series. Craig, fantastic conversation. Thanks for sharing this with us and putting it out. We'll definitely be putting it out on the podcast, guys. Go rehash and listen to it, make some notes, and please get hold of Craig because this is where this is happening, guys.
Thank you,
Have a
Kevin. Yeah,
fantastic,
great
day.
chats. Look forward to next week.
Thanks, Craig. Cheers
Thanks.
for now.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.